Randy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Well, we're glad you could take some time away and join us. We're actually just starting up our a new flight here in our simulator. So I'm setting everything the way it needs to be set, and we're going to be exiting this tiny little Diamond DA-40, and we're going to be getting into some big metal here with you in just a minute. So, Randy, would you mind introducing yourself to the folks here who are on the stream? We actually have quite a few viewers, and I know they would love to learn a little bit more about who you are.
Okay, my name's Randy Getz, and thanks for the promotion, Charles, but I did not retire as a colonel from the Air Force. I was
Oh,
actually a major.
oh my goodness! I am
So
sorry.
you
I
gave
know
me
that's
my
a.
promotion, but at any rate, everything else is pretty much accurate. I did spend 20 years flying everything from T-41s, which is a 172, to F-15s in the Air Force, and then I graduated from that and went to an airline. You can see maybe in the background of my picture what airline. It doesn't exist anymore, but this used to be Northwest Airlines. And I flew everything from DC-9s to the 747 for Northwest. And I retired in 2006, got caught by the age 60 rule.
Oh,
And thought I was done flying to 38 years, 15,000 hours, but I kind of missed it. So I jumped back into the light sport world and started renting light sports, which I fly today. I fly the mighty Cessna 162 Skycatcher. So anyway, that's my background. And I started volunteering at the Museum of Flight, which is the reason I'm here today, is raise money for them. In 2007, I've been there for 13 years, so I guess they keep me
oh,
for
that's
now.
fantastic. Oh, wow, 13 years, and I think I heard 38 years in the air.
Yeah, 20 in the Air Force. Not all of it was flying, but most of it was, which explains my lack of promotions. But that's a different story.
There's a whole nother story there that I'm sure I don't know, but
And then almost 18 at Northwest, which all I was a line pilot. Just flew every day, all the time.
wow. Well, now, what I heard from you when we had our conversation, and I was able to talk you into getting on the show. You told me that of all the aircraft that you flew, there was something mighty special about the 747. And I took that to heart, and I decided to go and buy one of these things. Well, virtually anyway. And we're sitting inside it right now. Now, if you can see the stream, you should be able to see around the cockpit here a little bit with my eyes. And we're in.
Well, I do see it. It's a lovely cockpit. Unfortunately, when I flew the 747, it was the 200 model,
Mm.
which is sometimes called the generic, or if you're of a certain age, the geriatric. And of course, it doesn't have glass. It's pretty much steam gauges in there. It does have some automation, but nothing like. Are you at a Dash 8? Is that correct?
It is a Dash 8, yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, we had 400s also, but I didn't have enough seniority to fly the 400. That was a really nice airplane. So I flew around in the 200s, which very durable airplane, very reliable, but not nearly as fancy. I did fly glass before and after the 747, but not in the 747.
Gotcha. Well, what do you say we go for a flight here? We'll take this plane. We'll take this plane up from Payne Field, and we'll take it down to Boeing Field.
Wonderful.
We don't have too far to go, but that's all right. I think it'll be a fun flight anyway. So we got the flaps down, spoilers are in. We're lined up on 16 right, and I've got sort of my coordinates sort of pre-plugged to head in the vague direction of Boeing Field, and we'll get there. So let's get rolling. And by the way, you did mention to me, and I do remember hearing that the cockpit noise is pretty significant on this aircraft. So I was sure to turn the noise down. And in our test flights, boy, did we have to! It was getting earplug loud.
Well, I thought maybe the newer models they had fixed that. I speak for the 200 again, an airplane built in the 70s, and like a lot of Boeings, it had a lot of wind noise, especially for sitting there for 10 or 12 hours at a time going to Asia.
Well, This one does have a bit of noise, but it feels well earned to me. It's an amazing aircraft, and I really have had a lot of fun flying it in the tests that we've done, and I have been able to actually land it. I don't know if that gives you any confidence or eases your fear any, but I've done this once.
Well, I think I told you when I talked to you before that I thought the 747 was one of the easier planes I flew out of the many planes. I think all that wing with the ground effect and 16 tires touching the ground, it's kind of hard to make a bad landing. You can do
it. you can do it. So, tell us a little bit, if you wouldn't mind. Tell us a little bit about what you do at the Museum of Flight. I mean, I think we're all here because we love the museum and we want to support it. And I'm not sure a lot of people know what a docent does, Randy.
Well, docents, I think every museum operates their docents differently, but generally we're there to provide the visitor with a more complete experience. Anybody can walk in and read the placard about the airplane, the name, and its stats, how fast it flew, how high it flew.
Even I can do that.
Yeah, but we're there to kind of add some color to it, maybe who flew it and why they flew it and why it was important, and just increase the visitor experience a little bit. We give tours. That's one of our primary jobs, to give organized tours. So a few of us are trained in different areas, and we'll do educational programs tailored to a certain age group and that sort of thing. And then we have special events, tours, and then public tours. So we're there just to help the visitor enjoy the museum more.
Well, that sounds fantastic. And is that a job that folks they do sort of full time, or is it something that that folks choose to sort of add to their repertoire of other things that they do? How does it work for docents?
Well, it's interesting. We got docents from all walks of life. I mean, they're not all pilots like myself, although a fair majority of them are. We have a lot of Boeing retired or even active employees, engineers, machinists, and we even have some people that have nothing to do with aviation rather than love aviation. And so it's interesting how when I went through training, I had a guy in my class that literally didn't know what an aileron was, but he had a deep desire to learn, and he studied hard and became one of the better docents. So it's we all have a little different background to bring to the table.
That's fascinating, and I love the fact that the Museum of Flight has sort of this. I think there's the docent army. They have such a passionate group of folks that have so many different varied experiences, and of course with the museum's aircraft, there are so many different stories to tell. So I'm wondering, as a docent, do you sort of have your aircraft, that you specialize in, and it's really, you tell the story of that aircraft, or how does that work?
Well, a couple areas. Out at the Aviation Pavilion, there's a couple aircraft in there, the 727 and the 747 that I actually flew. So, of course, I like to talk about them a little bit more. In the main area of the museum, here lately, I've been doing a emphasis on the fighter aircraft because of my background in the Air Force. And so I'll go down and talk about our 8 fighters in the Great Gallery, and maybe contrast and compare, and talk about supersonic flight, and, how that works. And
sure.
So, but we like to spice it up. We don't want to get stale. So then we'll change courses, and I may give a series of tours based on the airmail program, here in the United States. So it varies depending on what we want to do that day.
Got it. I understand. Well, I'd be interested to hear. And now, one thing that's probably good to know is we're practically right over KBFI at this point, but we just happen to be about 12,000 feet too high. So while I work on correcting that, I would love to hear a little bit more about the time you've spent in your career, whether it's a story about the 747 or any other aircraft that you fly that fits your fancy. We'd just love to hear a little bit more from you. And I'll kind of be busy down here with some dials and switches and And I'll see. I may be reading a manual or two. Don't worry about it. We'll be down on the ground in no time.
I have complete confidence in you, Charles.
And I just met you too. All right.
Well, I do have a little story. Maybe you can see that 747 in the background of my picture.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Well, like most pilots, especially military pilots, and maybe even especially fighter pilots, I have a study where this computer is in this room. You can't see around me here, but I have pictures of planes I flew, models of planes I flew, plaques of units I was in. But of all the pictures I have of planes I flew, I'll almost guarantee you to a one, I'm not actually in that plane flying. It's some canned picture of it, and somebody else was flying, and that's too bad. Well, I do have one picture of all these pictures I have where I'm actually in the airplane. It's the one behind me, that 747.
That's you.
I was flying Seattle to Tokyo. This is probably in 2001 or two, I'm not sure, in that time frame. And I'm a co-pilot, so if you look real close at the right window there, you can see me on my cruise mode, which is head back and kind of checking the circuit breakers, of course. We call that checking the circuit breakers. And we all monitor the same frequency. All the planes everybody goes in waves to Asia or to Europe, and we're all monitoring the same frequency so we can talk to one another about when we're going to climb, what the weather's like, turbulence. And I'm sitting there, and I hear on our common frequency, say cheese. And I said, what? Say cheese. And I said, who said that? The guy said, look to your right. And below me, to my right, below that picture there, was a United 777, 1,000 feet below us, overtaking us. And he said, I'm taking pictures. Give me your email. I'll send them to you at the hotel tonight. And what she did.
That's fantastic.
So like I say, that's the one picture I have that I'm actually in that airplane flying.
Oh, that's great. You don't get that opportunity too often.
No, that's very rare. In fact, it hardly ever happens. But the interesting part of that story was he was overtaking us and accelerated past us. And I'm not sure what the 777 cruise is at, but we were at probably Mach 8.4, and he just walked up and left us. And in an hour, he was out of sight. I said, he must have a hot date in Tokyo. Now, he was 1,000 feet below us. The winds were different down there, but not that much different.
No, absolutely not. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
I seem to remember when I've heard from my my father, who flew for American for I'd like to say almost as long as you have, maybe not quite, but he's had the opportunity to essentially sort of take photos of aircraft from his aircraft. Not sure if I got my dad in any trouble there by saying that, but I'm not sure whether any of them you could spot the pilot or the co-pilot or any of the crew. So I would think that that's a pretty rare occasion, and you've got a pretty rare picture there.
Well, you got to take my word. I'm sitting in that right seat. I don't think you can see me there, but I am there.
Oh, we believe you. Don't forget, we talked about those stories that they're true, or they're good enough to be true, or they're close enough to be true. I mean,
they're mostly true.
Mostly true. That's what I was looking for. Sorry, you got my head is in the dials and the gauges and all this other stuff now.
Oh, you're busy.
Well, I am, but this plane's doing most of the work for me.
Well, it's a very stable plane. It just it flies so well. It's just hard to believe that something that big can be built so well that it just flies like a ordinary plane.
Now tell me about some of the smaller planes. When you were with the United States Air Force, you didn't fly just big stuff. You flew some really sporty aircraft too, right?
Well, yeah, I started out in the B-57 at the Canberra. I don't know if you know that plane. It's a American-built version of the British English Electric Canberra. The RAF flew. It was our first tactical jet bomber. So it was an old airplane built in the early 50s. I flew it in the 70s. I flew the EB version, which was a jamming version of the airplane, and flew it in what was called Air Defense Command. We were
a jamming plane, you say?
The jamming, yeah. We had jammers, and our job was to be a professional target. we would simulate being Russian bombers flying in over the pole, and we jam the ground radars and the airborne radars in an attempt to prevent from being intercepted and shot down. Simulated, of course, because it was peacetime. Do that for many years. Then I transitioned to a small jet trainer that their Air Force's original primary jet trainer, the T-33. I flew that when I was a staff officer at ADC headquarters, and then I got my chance to finally go to fighters. And the first fighter I flew was the F-106, Delta Dart. It's a fighter interceptor, built in the 50s. I fly old airplanes, up to that point I had at least. But it's rather unique in that in 1959, the F-106 set the world's single-engine speed record, and believe it or not, to this day still holds it. And that's Mach 2.3, about 1,500 miles an hour.
And that was the Delta Dart, the 106.
Delta Dart,
and it still holds that record today?
Still holds it. Now, in defense, the emphasis shifted from going fast to highly maneuverable. We built planes that maneuver better and that weren't really built for speed. But it still holds it. I suppose we could have built something that took the record, but it didn't. And then I finally ended up, my last plane in the Air Force was the F-15 Eagle, which also was a fast plane. Technically faster than 106, but it had two big engines, and was maneuverable, and had a lot of power. And it set the time to climb record when it was a brand new prototype. They had a brand new F-15. I think this was in the early 70s when it was being developed at Grand Forks Air Force Base, North Dakota, where it was 40 below, so you had good thrust.
Oh yeah, those planes they eat cold air.
Yeah, and they took off and they climbed over 98,000 feet in just over 3 minutes. So a pretty good performance.
How many feet did you say?
Over 98,000.
98,000 feet. Now, if I remember right, there was perhaps a strategic reason to want to climb that high that fast. Was the F-15 the airframe that was designed to handle the anti-satellite missile?
In fact, it was. And in fact, the unit I was in, the last unit I was in by the F-15 was down at McCord Air Force Base. It was the 318th Fighter Interceptor Squadron. And we, along with the 48th Fighter Squadron on the East Coast at Langley Air Force Base, were picked as the original units that were going to pick up that mission. And they actually were rewiring our airplanes to accommodate the missile, but the program was scrapped long before we even got close to it, so we never trained for it. But they did fire one, and it did work. I think that was Edwards Air Force Base.
Yep.
And an F-15, I think the profile was to accelerate to just slightly above supersonic, and then do a 3 or 4 G pull to about 60 nose high and let loose of that missile about, 35,000. And that missile went up and impacted a satellite at 300 miles in the sky.
It's an incredible feat to be able to do that, and the fact that your unit was fielded with that mission, that was totally random. We hadn't practiced. Randy and I hadn't practiced that story at all.
No, I didn't even talk about that.
No. Hey, sometimes that's just what happens when you're out and flying. Well, I was wondering around your flying for the airlines. Any favorite routes? Any routes that you really enjoyed, that you really loved?
Well, I don't know. Every trip was different. And in the airlines, at least in my experience, there's two major areas. There's domestic flying, which can be quite different than international flying, and both have their positives and minuses. Mm-hmm. And of course, also depends on what your relative seniority is. There are some trips that are so bad that only junior pilots get them.
Oh no! like what? What's one that you'd give they'd give a junior pilot just to?
Well, for instance, when I was flying domestically in the DC-9, an old airplane with not much automation, to be sent on a 5-day trip to, say, the East Coast with bad weather was a lot like work. I can remember one trip. Day one was Minneapolis to LaGuardia, which is not, I don't know if you've been to LaGuardia, it's not the nicest airport in the world. To LaGuardia to Detroit, and then at that time Detroit wasn't as nice as it is now. Then Detroit to Washington National, which is another short little airport, and then we ended up Washington National to Boston and had to fly a Cat 2 ILS because it was foggy up there. Five legs in and out of eastern airports work.
Oh, so those not your favorites, but
well, I mean, given the choice, I wouldn't have picked that one. But normally, domestically, I flew the 757, and I had some seniority, so I had good trips, and I could bid some pretty nice trips. We flew that plane at my airline, sort of West Coast hub, East Coast layover, hub, West Coast layover. So, but there was a trip I picked up that was Seattle-Boston nonstop, back and forth for like 5 days, which meant I was home in my own bed every other night with per diem. So that was a good trip.
That's a good trip. See, these are the things that that people don't know about the airlines, like the sort of having to kind of work in the system and beginning to understand the system, and trying to get some creature comforts out of it, because you're not at home. You're flying, and you got to try to make the best of it that you can. But I think in a lot of cases, folks who aren't in the industry, they don't know all the things you have to do, and all the thinking that goes into making the best out of your career in the airlines.
Yeah, it's quite a the beauty of airline flying, as opposed to military flying, say, is you have total control. I mean, you can make it as ugly or as nice as you want relative to your seniority, based on what you bid. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be junior all your life. You can stay where you are and build some seniority, or you can bid out of your seniority and be kind of a junior pilot and suffer the slings and arrows of that, as opposed to, say, the military, where you go where they tell you.
I have heard that, having a few friends in the military and watching all the ways that they're moved around and sort of rebased and things like that. They'll move you. That's their way of saying they like you. And it's tough on the families, but I know that my friends have had some experiences that they couldn't get any other way, and it's been quite a journey for them. So,
well, it was, I flew with a lot of different pilots in the airlines, and they all came up a different way. But I really appreciate the pilots that came up through the civilian route. That is a hard route. You're paying for everything. In the early years, your jobs don't pay a lot. It takes you a long time to build hours, and they paid the price. Me, I joined the Air Force. They started paying me to fly airplanes from day one. So I call that the easy way. But of course, I gave a few years of my life to them. But
we've got folks here, I think, on the stream and part of our future leaders team who themselves are partway along or starting the journey, or are part of the aviation world, and they've come up in different ways. I know Alec, who was co-piloting with me here a little bit ago, and will be rejoining me in the right seat. He spent some of his time flying for a smaller airline, and has the stories to share, and it doesn't seem like an easy road. I'll say it that way.
No. It's a real struggle. I like I say, I have a lot of admiration for those guys that came up through the civilian route. It's not easy.
So when you talk about folks that can either keep their seniority, or they can trade their seniority and become junior again, why would you do that? Is that what's behind doing that?
Well, primarily it's money.
Oh, I see.
They're going for a pay raise, so they bid to a seat that they can barely hold, but they can hold it, but they're junior in that seat. And so then they're getting more money, but they're kind of paying for it in a lot of other ways. The other issue is I've seen some guys go upgrade to captain at a pretty junior level. And I suppose that's, again, for the money, but also maybe for the, that's the ultimate goal, become a captain and be your own boss, that sort of thing. So there's, again, everybody's got their different reasons, but I'd say it boils down to money.
Oh, well, hey, Randy is telling it like it is, and I like that. Well, now,
Yeah, my opinion only. It's worth not much, but you got it.
well, you've been there, and that's not something that everybody can say. So I appreciate the perspective. I know all of our viewers do too. So I think the last thing before we bring it in, and everyone I think is going to be incredibly frightened at the kind of turn I'm going to have to do to get this thing on the ground at KBFI. I would just love to hear your thoughts on the Museum of Flight. I think you've been there, you've been working with them. I know it means something to you. It means a great deal to you. But I'm just wondering your thoughts on, what the museum means to the community and why you love it so much, because this is something that we all share, on this stream and with this charity event. I want to hear your thoughts on the museum and what it means.
Well, we at the museum, of course, we're prejudiced, but we think there's probably three preeminent aviation museums in the U.S. The Smithsonian on the East Coast, of course, they get first dibs on almost everything because of their size. The Air Force Museum at Dayton, Ohio, which if you've never been there, is worth the trip. A quite large collection. And then, of course, on the West Coast, we think we're the premier aviation and space museum on the West Coast. And what I like about the museum is, well, first of all, the people, whether there be staff or volunteers, everybody is interested in educating and passing on their experiences, entertaining the public, and getting people excited about aviation, in particular, young people. We have an extensive education program at the museum. In fact, we get a lot of funding based on our education programs, and you'll see kids from all ages, from preschoolers to high schoolers, involved in many different programs at the museum. And I think that's a wonderful way to promote aviation and space and the STEM world, which we need right now, more engineers maybe. And I think we do a really good job at that. And the other thing is we have quite an international clientele. We get visitors from all over the world. And it's just a way to, get exposed to them, get their ideas. I learn a lot, or vice versa, they learn from us. And a chance to highlight the aviation, at least in the U.S. primarily, and compare it to contrast with the worldwide aviation. So it's just opportunity for everybody involved, the employees, the volunteers, and the visitors.
It's fantastic. I mean, I've been around the museum since I was a kid, and I've watched it grow up. And what I love about it is how much it's grown and how many new programs there are, and yet the feeling of the museum is still what I remember from being a kid. I can't think of too many organizations and institutions that have had that sort of feeling of home that stayed that way throughout its entire life, but the museum has managed to do that. And I don't know what particular kind of magic it has, but whatever it's got, it's working.
Yeah, I think it's been very successful in its mission, and it will continue to be in the future once we open up, hopefully soon.
Absolutely. You know what? This turn actually went a lot better than I thought it would.
Well, that's another saying we had in aviation: better to be lucky than good any day.
I think today that's going to be my catchphrase, because I shouldn't have gotten this lucky making this approach.
Sometimes it all comes together.
I'm okay with that, Randy, even if I can't explain it.
And it's a beautiful thing when it happens.
Yep, and I think it has a lot to do with the people. That's the way I like to think of it. It's about the people.
Yeah, it's all about the people.
All right, final notch of flaps, final approach 114 right, KBFI. We're going to be touching down, it looks like about 120 seconds late, but I don't know. That's pretty good for what we're trying to do here.
It's called time on target.
Uh-huh.
In the airlines, 120 second late is probably excellent. When you're dropping bombs, not so good.
No, and fortunately, I'm not doing a... Oh, landing gear. Hang on, everybody. This one's going to be close. We got 3 greens. And we're on the ground. Caught center line. I'm happy with that.
Well, my
Good job,
instructor
Al.
wouldn't be happy with that, Charles.
No, neither would my father, who has done this and is now giving me advice. And believe me, that wouldn't have passed muster with him.
Well, flying little airplanes on big runways, you got some slop. Flying a 747, they want you to hit that center line every time.
Absolutely, and they should demand the very best, and as long as they get someone who isn't me, they'll get it. But I'm just so happy that you could join us today, Randy. Thanks so much for making the time and coming to see us on the show and telling us all about your experiences in the museum.
My pleasure. Let's raise some money for the museum.
Oh, we're doing pretty good. As a matter of fact, we'd love to hear what the current count is. If anybody could give us a quick rundown on what our raise total is so far.
Got you there. We are now over $3,000 on our raise total.
All
So we have
right.
blown through our matching money.
Woohoo!
And our winner for our giveaway is going to be Art Moon 7. Congratulations. Congratulations
right.
on how much you guys are helping raise too.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that I could drop you back off here at the museum, Randy. Looks like I've got you right back here pretty close to the front door. You're just going to have to hop the fence. Is that okay with you?
I can do that. Thanks for the ride. Thanks for the ride, Cheryl.
You betcha. Take care, Randy. It's been great to have you on the show.
Thanks a lot. See ya.
See ya.